Hey everybody, Pete A. Turner, executive producer and host of your Break It Down show. First things first, I screwed up the initial part of the show and I wanted to apologize to our guest, Greg Spillane. I thought he was that Greg Spillane, not this Greg Spillane, which is sort of a weird thing. There are two of them, and when I was preparing, I'm like, this guy's a CEO, he's a voiceover talent. Oh my God, this guy's a super busy guy. It turns out he is the CEO, and he's not the voiceover guy. So I started off on the wrong foot. You'll hear that, but hey, we keep things real here, so you'll hear my mistake right away. But then we get into the show, and it turns out to be a fantastic episode. Look, in the time of COVID, when we're all freaking out about that, or racial injustice, or politics, and all that kind of thing, here comes Greg. And here's what Greg does. He's a serial entrepreneur. He was a high-end Division I athlete thinking about going to pro sports and ultimately ends up in business and has an exit early in his career and realizes, I need to learn more about business. Gets an MBA from USC and then gets back out there and starts to realize that he's got a knack for turning companies around. So his latest company, and do yourself a favor, before you do anything else, go to fancy.com. It's exactly how you normally spell it, fancy.com. That's Greg's company now. He's the CEO of Fancy, and it's a curated shopping experience. So, I don't know, they put collections together, and it's sort of Pinteresty in how it looks and everything. And everything I look on there, I get caught in, like, I need a bronze-colored carafe for wine. I need this, I need that. All these great, cool collection of products that are lifestyle type products. And I know that if you go there, you're going to be like me and just go, wow, there's so many great things here. By the way, I don't get in any way paid or rewarded to say that. I'm saying that because I liked it. I think you guys will like it. So check out fancy.com and see if you don't buy something. And if you do, let me know offline. You don't got to, it's again, nothing to do with Fancy and there's no reciprocal thing, but I'm just curious to see what you guys all think. So fancy.com, go there and check that out. And you're going to love what Greg and I talk about. We get in to the nitty gritty about how you run a company and building a corporate culture and how to use the sports to get over the top on a lot of things. I think you guys are really going to enjoy this episode. One more thing to say real quick. Save the Brave, savethebrave.org. You all are crushing it. There are so many of you that have already signed up and do monthly donations. I was talking with Nick Velez the other day, the president of Save the Brave, and he's like, man, it's really working with the podcast. So thank you all so much for what you're doing. And if you haven't done it yet, if you haven't pushed that button to click donate, well, I would ask you to, because we're really doing a lot of hard work out there. You saw that Scott and I drove across the nation to bury his friend David White, a veteran who died from suicide. Well, we want to keep doing these kinds of things. We want to keep raising money, keep the awareness thing going, and keep reaching out to the community. But veterans don't own suicide. Look out for one another. It's a crazy time. People are stressed out. There's a lot of problems out there in the news. Good Lord, the news is always trying to push us over the edge. So reach out to that person you haven't talked to recently or whoever you think of. Send them a text. You don't got to necessarily go out. Maybe it's too dangerous to do that, but let people know that you're thinking about them, because here's the God's honest truth with suicide, right? Sometimes you're hanging on with both hands so tight, trying not to lose any more of your rope, that you can't reach out and you're just not able to. And having someone from the blue reach out and say, hey, man, hey, friend, hey, lady, I was thinking about you. Let's have a chat sometime. That can literally make someone's day. Even if they're not at the end of the rope, just making someone's day every day, it's a good practice. I recommend it. All right, enough about that. Here comes Greg Spillane.
Lions Rock Productions.
This is Jay Moore.
This is Greg Proops.
This is Jordan Harbinger.
This is Dexter from The Offspring.
This is Nathan East.
Sebastian Younger.
This is Rick Marotta.
This is Stuart Copeland. This is Mick Gillette.
This is Andy Summers.
Hey, this is Skunk Baxter.
This is Gabby Reese.
This is Rob Bell.
Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero.
Hey, and this is Pete A. Turner.
This is Greg Spillane, and you're watching the Break It Down Show.
And now, the Break It Down Show with John Leon Guerrero and Pete A. Turner.
Yeah, we've got Greg Spillane on the show. Thanks to Jada for setting this up. It's always fun to work with all of the different PR type folks and agencies that are looking to try to expand the world of what we do. Greg is a voiceover talent. It's interesting that, like in the time of COVID and heck, riots everywhere, you've already built a life where you can do much of your work sitting at the house. Like, I'm literally wearing pajama pants right now while I work, It's crazy to think that back in the olden days, you would have to get up, get in your Hudson, drive down to, Capitol Records and stand there for 8 hours and do takes. Those days are long gone, man.
Oh man, that is so true. So there is another Greg Spillane that's a voiceover talent.
Oh shit!
I have a horrible voice, and I have no talent when it comes to that. But a lot of other things I do. So yeah, me and that Greg Spillane, we fight over all the domains, Twitter handles, and those types of things.
Well, my mistake. Yeah, okay, that's a little confusing. Well, that's all on me, man. So that makes a lot more sense now that I know that there are two of you doing this. I'm like, God damn, this guy's busy.
Yeah, right. But you're totally right with the remote work right now. You know, I think that this whole COVID thing has really proven that to a lot of people. You know, I mean, my company, Fancy. So I'm the CEO of Fancy.com. We're right. You know, we've gone full remote. You know, as a company, it was a concern first. You know, I mean, you all of a sudden have this distributed workforce. You have people working, from home. How is this going to work? And in a lot of ways, I don't think we've missed a beat, man. It's been really great.
Okay, so I guess tell everybody what Fancy.com is.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I took over Fancy, CEO of the company. I was brought in by the investors in early 2019. Fancy's been around since 2010. Since 2010, about 12 million people have come to Fancy. And really, what it is it's a marketplace to find the coolest and most interesting stuff in the world. We work with 800 brands, artisans, retailers from across the world, 35 countries. And we have customers from, really a global audience, 135 different countries that come to us. And you just find really interesting, unique products from these artisans that you wouldn't even know existed if you didn't see them.
But you were brought in because the company needed fixing and needed your special attention, and you're sort of known for this, not for voice acting, but for for fixing company. I'm like, God damn, he fixes companies and does this anyhow.
And he does voiceovers.
Yeah, but talk about that, because I mean that's you have investors that are like, we know this idea works, we need to get someone else who's running this ship, and then they think of you. How in the heck did you even develop that reputation?
Man, that's a great question. And it wasn't purpose, Bill. I didn't set out to become this turnaround guy. It's one of those things that happens somewhat organically. And I could take a little bit of a step back and just give you kind of a rundown of my career. So, and I was an athlete in college, attended undergrad on a football scholarship. Like everybody else, my dreams growing up were to be a pro athlete. But, when that sort of came to an end, I had to figure out what I wanted to do. It was right around when the internet was blowing up when I graduated college. I had kind of tinkered and was self-taught. So I decided I wanted to be an engineer and write code and build sites and build applications. And I did that for a little bit of time and realized really quickly I cannot sit behind a computer all day long and write code. It was going to absolutely drive me crazy. So I couldn't really get hired for the job I wanted, so I made my own. I basically started a company. I started an agency, and we would custom develop products for people, software, websites, those types of things. I was bootstrapping the entire thing. I was bouncing at a bar during that period of time to kind of make ends meet. I was paying my engineers and my programmers money while I was, eating top ramen and doing that whole thing. But, stuck with it for a number of years and developed a couple different products, software products that we ended up taking to market, and actually, became fairly successful, had an opportunity to exit that company. So I sold my first company in 2006. And, shortly after that, I went back and got an MBA because one of the things that I realized during that period is I had absolutely no idea how to run a company or run a business. But, and this is kind of where it's going to get to your point. During that process, I met some amazing people, as you always do when you go through business school, although it's obviously pretty expensive. And after that, I was, kind of in the enterprise world working for a big company. The company I was working with at the time, had 130,000 employees and was like $7 billion in revenue. And, I had a nice cushy job making decent money, kind of doing my own thing.
I don't want to go past something. I want to back up for a second. You went to USC for business school. You're a California guy because you went to San Diego State as well. But the USC connections, like what are the things that, and this is not really off topic, but it's sort of on topic. As you're trying to figure out what you're doing, you need that extra degree. So why USC, and does the pedigree of that school and the connections that are within it, I know like their MBV program is big for us veterans. It kind of takes you don't need the 22-year-old kid MBA version. You need this experienced veteran version of a business degree. So talk about how that works in terms of connecting you and jumpstarting, because getting a cushy job means that you are able to get in somewhere where there's cushy jobs,
No, absolutely. The network is a big selling point. When you're looking and when you're trying to figure out where you want to go, the program talks a lot about the network and the power of the network. And it's, you even compare it to some of the Southern California schools. I'm a Southern California guy. I wanted to stay local, so proximity made a big difference. But you compare it to like UCLA, which has a phenomenal business school, top ranked business school. One of the things that SC does talk about is sort of that SC connection and the network and the people you're going to know. And when you start in the program, it's like ingrained with you from day one. Like when a Trojan calls on you, you take that call.
Right.
And when you talk to somebody, the first thing you always ask them is, how can I help you? What can I do for you? So they build that culture really early on when you get started in the program. And what I found is it's absolutely true. I think that the people in that network really believe that and they really own that. And from my personal experience, you can get as much out of it as you want to get out of it. But like anything else, you got to put in the work. Nothing's going to be handed to you. But if you need to make a phone call or you need to get in touch with somebody, you can tap into that Trojan network and you can get in front of the people you want to talk to.
All right. So I interrupted you in the middle of your breakdown of your rise to power.
My rise to power. Yeah. So during the period, I met one of, they kind of put you in these pods, right? So you work with the same people over and over this 2-year period of time. And one of the guys I worked with was a gentleman named Greg Paris, and we became, friends, but I think just a really healthy respect in regards to like our ability to kind of complement each other and work together. And he had taken on a CEO role for a turnaround here in San Diego called Bump Network. It was started by a gentleman named Mitch Thrower, who founded Active. I don't know if you ever heard of Active Network. They ended up becoming a $1 billion company, went public. And so this was like his second venture. And it was kind of a roll up. They had bought like 3 or 4 different companies from around the country. There was a company in Canada. They bought a couple companies in Orange County, San Diego based companies. And, Greg Paris, Ed came in as the CEO, and his background was primarily finance. So he was looking for a tech guy, a guy that knew technology, knew marketing, business development. And he sort of pulled me out of the cushy enterprise world into this like unknown, crazy quagmire. It was this like company, but it was like getting it back in a startup. And it was truly a turnaround. I mean, this thing was a mess. It was all these different companies, all these cultures, all these different people. And we had a great time turning that thing around. We eventually pivoted and became what is now events.com. Okay. So if you've ever heard of events.com, that's the company that we grew. We spent the next 3 or whatever years there turning that thing around. Really became a very successful company. And he ended up moving on to take on another similar role. And I think kind of being like his right-hand man, he brought me over there because it was like, hey, let's do it again, right? And, so we did it a couple different times. He's had a tremendous amount of success in his career, and he's now on the investor side. So he runs a big fund here in Southern California, and he made a large investment into Fancy, which was a company that at one point was valued at almost $1 billion. And kind of being his guy, he brought me along. So he asked me to come up and meet the Fancy team and see if it was something I was interested in. And I had a chance to fly to New York. So that's where the company was founded. And, so the rest is history.
Yeah. You have an active background. You, and I don't want to put anything on where you're at now with Fancy, because obviously you're fully engaged as CEO, but you do like to change it up. You like to get in, do the work, and then find the next opportunity. I mean, that pattern goes back to the early aughts for you.
It's probably gotten me in a lot of trouble in my career. But I think without a doubt, it's allowed me to get to where I'm at right now, which is, the opportunity to run a cool company. Right. Yeah. But I do have a tendency to get bored of the monotony. So it's something I always when I interview people, I always say to them, I'm like, hey, look, you're going to come to a startup. There's going to be unknowns. Like you might miss a paycheck. Like we might be, running out of money in our bank. Like, there is no playbook for you. You're not going to come in here. No one's going to tell you how to do your job. Like you're creating your own playbook. But if you are the kind of person that wants to just be a cog in a wheel, then go get a job at IBM or a big corporation, and they'll do a great job of that. You'll get your job, and you'll be told what to do, and you show up to work and you do it.
Yeah.
But if you want to like really put like your thumbprint on a company and have the opportunity to build something, then come to a startup. And I think with me, and it manifests itself in different ways and in different outlets. Like I love to do art and music. Like I think there's a creative side of just my personality that likes this like formation of the company, building the company, designing the company. But the problem with me is like once the company's sort of there and it's just like operational and it's like just showing up and kind of like doing it on a day in, day out basis, I can kind of tend to get bored. And then I want to like go take on the new challenge.
Would you say that you're an entrepreneur, or are you some other classification within that? Because like the entrepreneur gets the idea, takes it from the, and bootstraps it, but you seem more like, I don't know, the Hennessy, like if I was to use a car building term, like you take what's there and make it badass and improve it. Well, how would you classify yourself?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that's fair to say that. I think I get classified as an entrepreneur a lot because I'm always in these startup roles. But the truth of the matter is, other than the company I started in my 20s, I haven't necessarily been a founder. I've been being brought in to take these companies. And I always, it's kind of a movie. Have you ever seen Apollo 13?
Sure. I love it. One of my favorite movies.
It's amazing, right? And there's a scene in the movie where they don't have the right filter on the spaceship, and they're all like, they're starting to die, and it's like they don't have enough oxygen to get back. And they bring in all the guys from NASA, and there's like they dump a pile of parts on the desk, and they're like, somehow we need to make this piece fit into this hole, right? And it's like, here you go, scientists, engineers, like you figure out how to take these parts and make it work so that these guys are able to survive. I always like use that analogy of like what it's like coming into these companies, because there's always assets. There's always amazing things there. They're just not quite hitting the mark as far as making it, a successful company. So it's like my job to come in there and like sort of take account of all the inventory, all the parts, all the different things we need to do. I know where we want to go to, and now it's getting the team to sort of align to build the parts and fit it in the hole so the company's successful.
There's a great book by Charles Murray, and I can't remember the co-author off the top of my head, but it's that story. It's the story of the Apollo program. And, if you will, the astronauts are the entrepreneurs. They get all of the press and everything. But, everybody, the guys down in the trench doing slide rules, and like when they show the monitors on movies and stuff like Apollo 13, they're much more elaborate. It really was just monochrome and numbers, and it's just straight data. And they were, computing everything. And then you have those guys in the back, the people that figured out how to make the engines not blow up, like just audacity and like, this is what our job is and we have to do it. It's a great example for what you do. It's fantastic because sometimes that whatever this part of the process is, and the process because you've done it enough times, but this one is fraught with errors and you have to go through these errors, and it takes, say, 8 months before you're going to have a reliable solution. I mean, that's how it was for those engines. They were just going to keep blowing them up until they figured the right pattern and the answer out, So when you see a chasm like that, it's going to be really hard. You're going to all want to tear each other's, and maybe not everybody's here at the end. Maybe they quit and you have to go somewhere else, but you will get through this. How do you handle those challenges? Because that's terrifying for people who are already in a startup, may not get paid next week because the money is moving differently. And you're like, and you have this impossible problem to solve.
Yeah. And I've gotten better at it over time. So the one thing I can say is it wasn't truly innate for me. I think first couple times, I was brought into these different companies, the leadership aspect of it was something that I think I struggled a little bit with. And, after enough scars and kind of making some mistakes and banging my head in the wall, I sort of figured it out. Yeah. I'm an old athlete, right? Like I'm a team sport guy. I was a football player. I'm used to football coaches. And that was the type of leadership that worked for me, right? Like somebody coming to me and basically like chewing me out and telling me like, I got to do better. And if I want to win, I want to be successful. You got to work harder. You got to try harder because the stuff that you've done in the past is horseshit, right? Excuse my language. It was a little bit of who I was, right? Yeah. And then, I'd come into these companies and I think I would take a similar type of approach. It's like, hey, look, we need to do these things and you're not doing these things and we're never going to and our competition is going to eat us alive, and we're not going to have jobs tomorrow. And if we want to be successful, like we got to, blah, 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 blah. And what I realized early on and after a couple battles is your team doesn't respond to that. And those types of things that you mentioned really do get in their mind. So what I've realized, and I think what we've done much better at Fancy and what I've done more recently in my career is, it's really, it's first of all, finding the right people. I mean, that's important. You have to have people that are excited by challenges. I mean, like yourself, right? You're an entrepreneur, right? Like you started, your career and built your career. Like those are the type of things that you want. You have goals and aspirations of who you want to be in your career. Like you need to have a team that has that. Then once you have that team in place, right? It's like setting a vision of where we're all going, getting buy-in on that vision, right? Like the team has to believe that this, we all are going to the same place. And then at that point, it's sort of just the respect for the person, and the respect for the person that person's has their own kind of individual goals that they need to achieve in mind, and kind of working with those people and, that the work they've done in the past, because a lot of these people are holdovers from a previous time, like respect the work that they've done in the past. And even if we're not doing the best thing and the company's not in the best position, those people have worked hard in the past and they have to feel like that their contributions that have occurred in the past are important and they're a big part of our future. And then, once you kind of get all those types of pieces together and you get the team rally behind you and they believe in you and they believe in your vision, then you just run it like any other business.
Yeah, there's a lot of good things in there to really jump in and talk about. But the other day, myself, Pete Koch, who used to be an LA Raider, so a high-end football player, and then a director named Mark Pellington, who's just a massive mountain of a man. His dad was an NFL player, and he was on his own NFL path until he blew out his knee before they could reliably fix knees. But he gets like the rough and tumble. He played lacrosse in college, and he said, you cannot grab anybody by the face mask anymore, at least in the movie industry. You can't say, get your ass up, go over there, grab that camera and get over it. You can't say like simple things where like you powerfully direct someone and put, though in any hint of a disparaging comment in there, it will shut your production down. Is it as equally challenging in terms of transition from that kind of like get up, get your shit, get going kind of leadership style to the new one? And then how would you characterize the new leadership style?
Oh man. Yeah, I agree with him. And that's to the point. Like, I think I early in my leadership career, I had a little bit of that want to grab you by the face mask kind of like approach to things. And, I think there's still some people out there that resonates with, but it's not going to resonate with everybody. It's a good question. I don't think you can take leadership and sort of like apply one statement that's going to be applicable to all different types of people. I have seen, differences based on age. We talk about millennials and we talk about Gen Z and, all these different people. And I'm in a situation where my company, I have 22-year-olds that are in really critical role, but I have people that are in their 40s that are also in critical roles, right? And people all in between. And it is funny because you can see differences in what makes somebody, what resonates with one person versus what somebody else is. I think at the end of it, the one thing that I really just try to get done with people, and maybe this is where that grab the face mask thing doesn't resonate as well, is like just like a true deep respect for who that person is and try to understand who that person is and what they're looking for, and then shape sort of the direction that we're trying to take as a company. I mean, that's table stakes, right? Like we have to be successful as a company. Right. Everybody on the team has to buy into the vision of like, we're here to create a successful commercial, endeavor. We have investors. We have people who have put really good money into this thing and that believe in us, that have invested in us, and their goal is a return. Everyone has to understand that. But once everybody kind of understands that and they understand the pieces or the things that need to get done, sort of the tactics and the strategy, then I think it's the individual respect of who is this person, what is important to them, what kind of resonates with them. And then, you just kind of got to manage people individually like that. I find myself cheerleading a lot more than I used to.
Okay.
My nature isn't a cheerleader. My nature is like, come in, like you said, grab you by the face mask, hey, look, we did some great things, but let me tell you all the things that we're not doing well enough, right? Like, and you think about like an NFL football team, right? Tom Brady, arguably the greatest quarterback that's ever. I guarantee you, every Monday morning after a game, Bill Belichick would go in there and tell him 50 different things that he did wrong, right? And Tom Brady, that's his job. He's got to sit there and he's going to listen to it. He's not going to be like, hey, I'm the greatest ever. You can't tell me anything. What are you talking about? No, that doesn't work. Like, coaches tell players what they're doing wrong, right? But I find now I'm more of a cheerleader, more of a, hey, great job, guys. We're doing some great things. Like, people need to feel confident. They need to feel like we're moving in the right direction. Their work is appreciated, and those types of things. And I think more than anything, that's what I see in today's kind of work environment.
As I've gotten older, I've learned to appreciate that most everybody's doing their best at any given moment. Even if their best is way below their best, but right now, everybody's dealing with COVID and we've got, riots going on. Your best is not like your peak best. It's like, this is what I've got today. Right. But as a leader, I mean, I have to imagine that, like, you have to keep that kind of a mindset and then get them to believe that, like, hey, you are doing your best. Like, yeah, dig deeper, but at some point you just can't keep saying dig deeper or like, you have to, they have to believe that they are doing their best. And so, like, I can, when I was, working overseas in combat zones, people would get freaked out because I was going to go take a nap, right? Because that would refresh my brain and my body. And they would like say, oh, half day. And I'm like, hey, you know what? I promise you, there's going to be plenty of war when I come back. Like, it's like not going to be over. Oh, you missed the end, Pete. Kissing the girls in the street. It doesn't happen that way. So, I am working my heart out, but at some point, the best thing for me to do my best is to rest or to do whatever. So how do you help folks realize what their best is and then believe it?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's funny you say that. A good friend of mine just took over as the CO of a squadron up at Pendleton. We were talking a little bit about this because, he likes to surf and work-life balance and has a family and those types of things. And he, as he was taking over command, the previous commander said to him, he's like, hey, listen, man, it's really important that your troops, like your people, see you do things. Like, you can't live in the office, right, 7 to 7 every single day. Like, go surf during lunch. Like, get out, go work out. Like, people need to understand that work-life balance is okay. I think that's true. I mean, I know personally, I try to support it as much as possible. I treat my employees like adults, and I tell them that all the time. If somebody tells me they need to take time off, like, I don't go, yes, you have permission, you can take leave. It's like, yeah, absolutely. If you need it, you need it. Like, I trust you that you know what your job is. We've talked about what the expectations are, and whether you do it, in 20 hours this week or 60 hours this week, or whether you take off Tuesday to go hang out with your family or take them to Disneyland, like, do what you got to do. At the end of the day, we all have a mission here as a company, and you know what your role is. And I expect, and I trust probably more than anything, that you're going to do that's necessary for us to be sort of successful as a company.
So one of the things that I do, I thought it was going to be more of a profession, but it just hasn't worked out. But I'm a bit of a cultural expert because of my time in combat zones, and I was a spy, so I would have to go out and build trust with the locals. I've learned a lot about culture, and on occasion I get hired to come in and talk to primarily the CEO, like company culture, internally, that kind of thing. And one of the things that I've learned from doing this is that the culture you're trying to set up has to be discoverable. You can't do it yourself because when you show up, you're the CEO. But someone like me, I can go out and have conversations, and I can say, hey, you want, family, work-life balance, and work hard on game day to be the thing, but I can't find that. And so how do you, so I heard you say culture earlier, how do you test for culture and ensure that what you're getting is what you want, as opposed to, it's great when good things happen and you're like, yeah, it's even better than I imagined, but culture doesn't tolerate design, at least not without a lot of hard work.
No, that's a really good point. And it is something that I've almost struggled with a little bit, but, coming into companies, trying to design a culture is very difficult. Because you're right. I think your point is culture happens a little bit more organically. Mm-hmm. You can plant some seeds and you can kind of try to shape culture, but you can't come in and dictate culture.
Right.
I think if you come in and dictate culture, you're probably not going to be successful. Yeah, we've spent a lot of time, and probably similar to yourself. Like I've read a lot on it, and I'm a sort of a student of kind of building culture within organizations. And one of the things that I learned early on and pulled from some books, and we've had some coaching, is kind of based around like the Rockefeller principles. I don't know if you've read any of Vern Harnish's books, where you set this like kind of guiding principle of the company. Right? Like, what's our vision? Like, where are we going? What's sort of the mission of the company? Why are we doing what we're doing? And then you set, core values, and like I think of events.com, where really it started, we only had 4 core values, right? It was like teamwork, innovation, customer first, and then, like respect for team. Yeah. And what we did is, our belief was, hey, the mission, the vision, that's what we're trying to do. Here's sort of the goals that you have and how we're going to measure them. But the core values are how we live, right? It's how we do the things that we do. And then like when we would go around the group, go around our team together, and we talk about different things, we would kind of like call out the core value of a particular person. So if someone did something great, hey, we closed this huge deal, it'd be like, hey, let's call out the core value of like what happened. And you try to like sort of like instill that within the team so people kind of understand like, hey, this is what's important to us, right? Like this is who we are as a company, and we're going to reward it, right? Like we always say, you dictate the culture by who you hire, who you fire, and who you promote, right? In a lot of ways, because people see like who's getting rewarded, like who are the good people, and the people who kind of live your culture and are doing the right things, like those are the people that you want to elevate, and you want to be able to like call out when they do something great and why it's great. And people who are not cultural fits, or unfortunately the people that either have to change or going to have to leave your company. So even with all that, culture is going to kind of like morph organically like anything else in the organization. But yeah, I mean, you try to control it as much as possible. You try to plant those seeds, but you're right. It becomes what it becomes.
Someone that I've become friends with, he's been on the show a couple of times. He's a serial entrepreneur of like the truest kind. And he was saying, and it's counterintuitive at first, like, experience. But he said, if you're not firing your sales director every, 18 months, you're just not doing it right, because you need the next sales director all the time. Do you subscribe to that theory, or do you look at it a different way? And then what would be something else like that where it's just like, wait, what? You purposely are firing this person every 18 months? And I guess for those who are listening, the idea is that the sales director you hire now is not the one you need 2 years from now. You need the next one up. So anyhow, that's just for the audience. They understand that. But what are your thoughts on that philosophy? And what's something else like that you've learned that's counterintuitive, but you just know that it has to be true?
Oh, man. That's a tough one. It's tough because I've been in a similar situation, right? And personally, for instance, early in my career, like with events.com, I was brought in, I was the COO of that company. Right. When we came to turn that thing around, it was relatively small. And then, we scaled that thing up to almost 100 employees. Right. And there was always a lot of talk of like, oh, hey, now that we're getting bigger, do we need, it's like, do you need to replace me? Right. Like I was in a situation where it was like the feeling was like, great, now we're a bigger company. Let's get rid of the CEO and we'll bring in a new leader and we'll bring in new COOs. And we got to bring in these people who have, scaled companies to multi-billion-dollar companies. And I remember myself, it was always like kind of offensive. It was like, well, why can't I, that person had their first chance. Like they didn't start by being able to scale a company to $100 billion company, right? Like I've gotten us to this point. Why am I not the person to take us to the next level? So I've heard that philosophy a lot. I think that there's a lot of truth to that. And I think in certain companies, it makes sense, right? Okay. Like a VP of sales that goes into a SaaS company and is able to take them from like $1 to $10 million in annual revenue very well may not be the guy that's going to be comfortable running a sales organization that's going to get to $100 million in revenue. And it's a very different process, kind of like scraping together the first $10 million in annual recurring revenue than it is to run a sales organization that can get you up to $100 million. I would never go into it though with like a hard, fast rule. This is my personal opinion, with a hard, fast rule of this person can't be the one that does both. or, hey, this person's going to live their sort of life within this company within this period of time, and then we're going to replace them with somebody else. I think there's amazing entrepreneurs, and you see it all over like Silicon Valley with startups where, a 25-year-old kid starts a company and, he has no experience. He's never, run a company at scale, but he hits lightning in a bottle, and all of a sudden, the company's doing well, and, he's the CEO of a $1 billion company. And it's like, do you have to get rid of him? Like, does the board need to take him out of his role so we can bring in an experienced CEOs who's run a $1 billion company in the past? Like, most cases, no. In most cases, those CEOs can continue to run and become, extremely successful CEOs into their 30s and 40s, etc.
I've talked to a lot of those people along the way. I for a while was running a show called Popping the Bubble, and we talked to a lot of tech entrepreneurs. And it struck me that for as remarkable as those folks were a lot of times, they just were, clearly, obviously paper thin on experience, and they were just full of bad judgment. Like they just didn't have the experience and the wounds to get these things right. Like, for example, an open bar at work. Like, such a bad idea.
Yeah.
IBM learned that a long time ago. Like, you can't do that here. And not that you can't have drinks and social hours, that kind of thing, but just there are so many things where you're like, when you're 35, you're going to look back at this era of your life and go, I didn't know the first thing. But they do have that magic of potentially finding that lightning, So what are your thoughts? Like, how do you look, you recognized it. You said, I need to go back and get some more school. How does someone who's captured lightning in a bottle understand that I need to go get this MBA?
I don't think everybody has to go back to an MBA. For me, it was the right decision. I get asked that a lot. Like, should I go back? Should I go back? And the one thing I always say to people first is when they ask me that, it's like, why would you go back? Right? Like, I want to understand the reasons. If you want to go back because you think it's going to help you get a better job, I would say probably not the best idea, especially if you're a little bit later, a little bit older and later in your career. It's not something right out of college. Like, if you're, an 18-year-old and you're like, hey, I want to go work at Goldman Sachs, I'd be like, all right, well, then here's your path.
Yeah.
And you do this, and then you got to go to Harvard, or you got to go to Stanford or Columbia, whatever it is, and get your MBA, and, kind of know that from the beginning. But, if you're in your mid-20s and, you've kind of done a few things, you're like, I'm thinking about going back because I'm not happy, and they're not going to come recruit you. Like, that's not who those people are recruiting for. For me now, it taught me the rules of business. I think that's the best way I can say it is it helped me understand the fundamentals of finance and accounting and sort of like, underlying, marketing, how statistics is used. And like, I was a tech guy who kind of had some, I think natural creativity and understanding of like sort of marketing and sales. But like, I could never sit in a room with a VC and have a conversation and talk about the hurdle rate or a discount rate or any of those types of things. And that's what the MBA helped with me from that side. But to get more specific to your question, I think one of the things that's really cool about a lot of these entrepreneurs that are able to start successful companies, and I think it sort of depends on the scale of it. But if you went out there and you raised money and you really have caught lightning in a bottle, there's a really good chance you have some great investors around you, and you can build a board. Yeah. You can build an advisory group. Your investors are typically, people who are very experienced and, have a portfolio of companies of experience that they've been able to pull from. And if you can kind of get these people around you, they can help you, number one, make some strategic hires to bring some maybe, adult supervision, quote unquote, around you. And then, secondly, they can help, guide you through some of these really difficult decisions. And like stuff like understanding how to read a balance sheet or build a financial model, like that stuff can be taught, and if you're a smart enough guy to develop a new widget that kind of, catches lightning in a bottle or whatever it is, and you're sort of blowing up and growing, like you obviously got a little bit of natural talent and sort of the fundamental technical aspect of it, like you can learn over time. But I think, specifically to answer your question, it's surround yourself with good people, man. Have some advisors, have some people around you that you can trust, that kind of understand your company, that are sort of got skin in the game for you, whether they're investors or people that have stock in the company, and listen to those people. And I think you can become successful that way.
And that's a great answer, because it's I could ask 100 different people and get 100 different answers, but But that's sort of the point, right? It's like, yeah. And I don't want to disparage young entrepreneurs who start incredible companies because I think it's fantastic. And then there are the pieces like another thing I learned along the way was that you never bet against software engineers because they solve tiny little problems and then sell that company to whatever company it is. And that problem is solved. And then they go and they solve another problem. And that in and of itself is remarkable just to make tiny bridges all the time with software. It's mind-blowing, the things that they realize, like how to sell. This is one of the ones, this is remarkable to me. They were gathering data on how you attacked with your mouse and then measuring dwell time on a certain target and extrapolating from that, like buying patterns. If you give that to like Amazon, oh my God, and Amazon will give you, $5 million for that because they'll recoup that, not in an instant, but, just because they want that predictive ability and they want to stay ahead of the market. And that's just the tiniest little thing ever,
Yeah, man. The software engineers today, I mean, you go out to the Valley, Silicon Valley, and the brain power that's out there is unbelievable.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I've come to the realization real early on, it's like, I can't compete with that. So I'm going to have to find other ways to compete in this world.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just the gaps that they see that you're not aware, like another company just basically looked at, and I'm being very unfair to what they do. They looked at server fan performance as data because, hey, look, servers are expensive. If they're not running well, you want to catch it ahead. It's like, oh my God. And for a large company like Amazon or whatever, who's got a bazillion pieces of data flying around, to know that your fans are performing properly. Who would ever think of that? Like,
Right. But you solve something like that and you go to a company like Amazon with all these server farms and you're saying like, hey, listen, you're performing at this percentage. My software, my product is going to reduce that by 28% or improve by 20%. And we just quantify that for you really quick. That costs you $28 million a year. Our software costs $5 million. Why don't you buy it? It's like, it's a no-brainer, right? Yeah. And there's no competition because they invented this thing. And all of a sudden, before they know it, every 75% of the servers in the world are using this particular product.
It's industry standard. Yeah. They're just giggling.
Yeah.
But let's quit talking about Amazon. Let's talk about Fancy because, all you got to do is go to the website for literally half a second and you go, oh, that's cool. I'd like that. It's like, I don't know. How do you characterize? I'm not going to characterize it. You tell me, how do you characterize it?
Hey, this is P.A. Turner from Lions Rock Productions. We create podcasts around here. And if you, your brand, or your company want to figure out how to do a podcast, just talk to me. I'll give you the advice on the right gear, the best plan, and show you how to take a podcast that makes sense for you, that's sustainable, that's scalable, and fun. Hit me up at pete@breakitdownshow.com. Let me help. I want to hear about it. I don't know. How do you characterize? I'm not going to characterize it. You tell me. How do you characterize it?
Yeah, I mean, look, I could go into the whole underlying model of the company, but it is exactly that. Like Fancy's always been the place to discover, and I think discover is the key word, coolest and most interesting products in the world. It's Fancy's, it's crowd curated. It's got a heavy social component of this. People come to us when they find interesting or cool things that they've come across that you don't see elsewhere. You don't see in Amazon, or you wouldn't know to even look for it, right? People come to Fancy with those, and we use sort of our internal curation as well as kind of a social curation component of when people are liking products, we call them fancies. That stuff comes up. People can follow other people, create lists, those types of things. And you go there because it's kind of a fun experience and you're going to see a bunch of stuff that you've never seen before. And we use, really nice, high quality lifestyle imagery. But at the end of the day, if you're the kind of person that, wants to be an individual and wants stuff that kind of becomes conversation pieces in your house or something that, you're just not going to find at the mall because, they're just not in the mall. Fancy's a great place to find really interesting stuff.
Yeah, it's sort of like a cross between Pinterest and Etsy and, it's just oh, you can put a bottle opener on the back of a C-clamp. All right, I need that,
Yeah, totally.
If I'm going to use a C-clamp and I'm going to drink beer when I'm in my shop, why not? I'm always looking for, I'm banging it on my, let's use the C clamp. It's fantastic.
Yeah, when I first started, because like I said, I was brought in 2019. I would just ask them, tell the employees, like, hey, so how do you describe fancy? Kind of almost the same question you asked me. And one guy said to me, one of the guys, he's like, fancy is the place to find stuff that you didn't know you needed, but once you see it, you have to have it.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, that's a good way to put it. But it was cool, man. I'll tell you, I spent a lot of time working in the software as a service world, more traditional B2B software, talking about things that we were talking about earlier, like, how long do you keep your VP of sales? Because we got to scale ARR and, that type of stuff. And, this is a consumer product. And, for me to kind of be brought into a company that like Kanye West is tweeting about and, Drake, has a profile on and, it's like culturally relevant. I mean, there's, I can tell you some of the names of people who are still, use fancy on an almost daily basis. It's fun. It's cool. It's interesting. We get to work with amazing merchants, amazing vendors. We have an awesome customer base. It's global. 30% of our customers are outside of the United States. So it's been fun, man. It's definitely the most fun company I've ever had a chance to be part of.
Yeah, it really is sort of like it's all these great little pivot points that all work together nicely. Like there is a lifestyle element to it. Like if you like this kind of lifestyle, you can find again Pinteresty, sort of thing. The ability to so one of the other things I've learned along the way talking to entrepreneurs is that your invention is great, but you can't be so in love with your invention that you don't take time to get people like Drake to be interested in it. And that kind of thing. How do you, while simultaneously leading a crew of people that all have different needs, how do you figure out where to balance your time, man? Because you've got to lead your folks, but you can't be micromanaging. You got to balance all of these things. You need to have work-life balance. You got to go see your family and your kids, even if you don't like them. You got to do all these different. And then also, you have to get people to give a darn about your website. I mean, look, if there's a thing that's more douchey than, hey, check out my company, it's, I have a podcast, how do you get people to care that fancy even exists?
Yeah, that's a good question. That was something that took some time for me to, kind of develop as a leader. And I had a great advisor tell me this because I do like to get into the weeds. That's just my nature. Okay. I enjoy the technology of things. I enjoy the marketing of things, the branding of things. Like I want to sit in product meetings where we're going to talk about the next cool feature that Fancy's going to build. But what a great advisor told me, he's like, hey, listen, he's like, I know that's what you want. And, from your like COO career, kind of being more of an operator, product person, but like your job as a CEO is not that. Right. That's not your job. You have to hire great people and you have to trust people and people have to run those things. Your job as a CEO is going to be to set the vision. It's going to be able to kind of like manage your people, sort of be that cheerleader that we talked about, but ultimately get out in the world and like find things and business development opportunities and like, paint the picture and be the advocate for Fancy. So it is doing stuff, like this, having conversations like this. And by the way, I love these conversations because they're just fun, right? Yeah. This is like awesome. I love talking about Fancy. I love talking to investors. I spend a lot of my time talking to investors. We're in the process of raising another round of capital right now, some growth capital. The turnaround, it's mostly complete. We've really put ourselves in an amazing position. And now we're looking to raise some capital that we're going to invest in new customer acquisition. So, I talk to investors, a couple times a day. I'm talking to either existing investors or new investors, writing correspondence. We're actually launching a crowdfunding campaign right now because we want to sort of present this opportunity to our user base. Like I said, we 12 million users have used Fancy since when we started. How do I balance it all? You just got to do it, man. I don't know. I don't know if I have an exact formula. I think it's kind of like what I said with my employees, or how I take my employees, if I treat people like adults and I let people sort of understand what needs to get done. Like I know what needs to get done. I know what correspondence I need to have. I know when I need to, sort of more micromanage my team. I know when I need to just kind of get out of my team's way. But I also know what I need personally, right? I am married and I do have 2 young kids, and it is important for me to spend time with them. And, I still like to be fit, so I need to work out, although you can't go to any gym. So, it's like home gym push-up kind of thing.
Yeah.
And, I think what I've been able to do in my life is sort of meld it all together in a way to where there isn't a huge separation, to where my work kind of can blend into my family, but I've been lucky enough to do it in a way where it doesn't necessarily impact my family, if that makes sense, where I'm a different person at work than I am around my family. I think I've been lucky enough that I can kind of be the same person, regardless of where I'm at. And it's just sort of allowed me to manage that entire balance across the spectrum.
In terms of products, it's such a neat time for invention of things, like the rediscovery. Like I'm looking in the barware section, and just the reinvention of the glass and all the different ways to, who knew that you needed to aerate wine? And now look, there's like 5,000 ways to do it, and they're all just so cool looking, And then how about lights? Like right behind me up here is your name and a little like marquee light thing.
Oh, yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to see because I got to get it closer. But the point being, lights have completely changed in the last even 5 years, what's possible and what a light actually is. It's incredible, all of these different things. And to have a place like, maybe not an inventor, but a curator of new things, someone who can take and go, oh, here's an idea, way to do this. Like the technology's there. It's like, what do you want to create? Like, I want to make a glass shaped like this or whatever it is. What excites you in terms of like the products you guys get? Like what's your sweet spot, would you say?
Well, first to your point, you hit the nail on the head. We are in, I believe, a golden age of, and we call them direct to consumer brands. These are artisans, brands, entrepreneurs, whatever it is, that had an idea or had a concept. They build a product, develop a product, and they're able to go to market, right? And they're not in retail. They're, a lot of times these are small people working out of their garage, or, just have a handful of employees, right? You're not going to find this stuff in Macy's. Like Costco isn't carrying this stuff, right? So they're selling direct. And what's happened is you have this convergence of all these different technologies, right? Like, so Shopify, from an e-commerce perspective.
Yeah.
Shopify has made it so amazingly easy for somebody to be able to create their own online store, right? And then you have these like ShipStation and all these logistics companies, or even like third-party logistics companies that will store your products. You can ship your products to them, and they'll do the pick, pack, and ship, right? You don't even have to carry inventory anymore. And then you have sites like Alibaba, right, which you have access to thousands of manufacturers around the world. So you can take an idea or a concept, and you can easily reach out and you can find, a manufacturer that creates these types of things. They can work with you on the design to produce this. You can build the product. You can have it shipped directly to Amazon or any other type of 3PL, third-party logistics, that will hold it. You can build an e-commerce store with Shopify in a matter of days. And all of a sudden you go out to market and you have a product or a new invention that you can sell online and reliably ship to anybody in any part of the world, right? Like that's easily done. Not super easy, but easily done. All those pieces are now in place. So what's happened is you have all these new entrepreneurs, for lack of a better word, that have had these ideas for creating these lights and these different products, and they're purpose driven, right? These are people who have like a story behind it. Like, where did this idea come from? Why did they do these types of things? Why are they different? Are they using all renewable materials? Are they giving 10% of proceeds back to a particular charity, whatever it is, right? There's like a story around it, and which is awesome. But as consumers, we're also more attracted to that. Like, we're all at a situation in life where I think, because of just the commoditization of products in life, it's like, yeah, I got a Costco membership and Costco's got amazing things, but like, do I want to have the exact same thing that every other suburban male in my neighborhood has because we all shop at, Costco with our wives, right? Like, and you see it all the time. Right? Young kids, they play soccer. You go out to the soccer fields, and it's literally like the same wagon that you buy from Costco or the same, Tommy Bahama chair. It's like every single parent out there has got the same exact thing. So, we're all looking for stuff that means something to us. It's different. It's unique. And you have all these amazing brands that are creating these really cool and interesting, unique things. And I think that that's where we see Fancy playing in. Like, you don't know what you don't know. These brands don't have the ability to sort of like direct market you and reach you, and they're not in retail locations. And, maybe they're trying to get you on an Instagram feed, or they're going to kind of do some paid marketing stuff. And you might find them that way. But I think where Fancy sits in is we try to locate these people, these amazing brands, these inspirational stories, and we try to curate them, and we try to present them to people, in a way so they can find and discover really interesting, cool stuff.
Let me ask you a bit of a challenging question here along those lines, because you're going to go out for a round of funding, and that means that you're going to, in effect, pimp everybody else's, audience, their customers, and you're going to say, we've got all these customers on this site and all these creators. But ultimately, at some point, you guys have to be good at breaking brands. Like this person started here and they sell the most shoes ever, or whatever that's going to be. How do you do that? How do you help someone? Because look, podcasts, you got to get discovered. And how do you do that? Well, at some point you run out of capacity to be on every social media site. At some point it's just, there's hard work isn't necessarily enough. How does a brand like Fancy help other brands become sustainable and a career? That's like, that to me would be the gold standard. Like, we take people and we give them, the ability to create their own living, building what they love to build.
Yeah. Yeah. We've done it at Fancy, going back, years, like, Purple mattresses, which, you've probably heard of. They've blown up. They've definitely jumped beyond a direct-to-consumer brand, but they were an early direct-to-consumer brand. They did tons and tons of stuff with Fancy in 2013, 2014, before anybody knew who they were. And we have a long list of direct-to-consumer brands that are sort of like household names now that we've all heard of, that have either been acquired or that are now just big enough that they don't necessarily need to rely on working with third-party marketplaces that started selling on Fancy during those periods of time. Now, their success isn't all because of Fancy. I mean, we're a channel, right? I'm sure you have certain channels that you've used that you're like, yeah, this has been successful. This has helped me, grow my audience. But it's not a end all be all, right? There's other things that you're doing, and there's other things that those brands are doing. But I think that's where we see ourselves, right? We're a channel for them to reach an audience. A lot of brands that have started on us have grown and become extremely big. I mean, bigger than we are, quite frankly.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but I definitely want to give you a chance. Like, what should I have asked you that I've missed on? I mean, we covered a lot. I dig what you guys are doing. I love the Fancy brand. It's sort of like looking like like that one quote you said, like you didn't know you needed it, but all of a sudden I got my credit card out. It's neat to look at. So what should I have asked you?
Yeah. No, I mean, look, we had a good conversation. The one thing I would say that is coming up is, we are going to be launching a crowdfunding campaign. So, Fancy's got some amazing backers behind us. I mean, the chairman of our board is one of the co-owners of the Boston Celtics, Jim Plata, billionaire. One of the other large owners of the company is Francois Pinault. He's actually the CEO and chairman of Kering. Kering is you probably never heard of Kering, but you've heard of Gucci and Balenciaga and like Saint Laurent and like the 20 other major luxury brands that they own. He's married to Selma Hayek and all those types of things. So they're on the board of directors. And we have some amazing investors and people that have been involved with the company from the very beginning. People like Will Smith and Andreessen Horowitz and General Catalyst and huge institutional investors and those people. But one of the things that we are looking to do, and we're excited about it, is we're going to offer a chunk of the company to our user base. We've always had a very eclectic and somewhat affluent user base, people who have been extremely loyal to Fancy over the last 10 years of our existence. And, we kind of want to give them an opportunity to take part in this and have ownership in us and share in, the hopeful future success of this company. So we're going to be raising, it's about $1 million it's a portion of it. Our board has actually committed already to match any dollar that comes in through our crowdfunding 1-to-1. So we'll be raising another $1 million from our board. But we're going to use that primarily for growth. We want to continue to tell a Fancy story. We want to introduce us to more users that are looking to find awesome and cool and interesting new products. So we'll be launching that soon. And if anybody's interested in that, kind of keep watching it. We're gonna do that through WeFunder. And obviously, people can reach out to me directly at any time, LinkedIn, or my email is greg@fancy.com.
And we'll put all that stuff in the show notes too, so you guys can find it. And seriously, every time I go to a different tab on the thing, I was looking at watches, and there's just brilliant, concrete watch. I'd never thought of that. Super neat. Maybe not my thing, but the next thing you're like, look at that. So I definitely encourage you guys all to go out. Just take a look around and let me know. Here's what I want you to do. Let me know if you don't find something that you like, because you're not going to be getting a hold of me, It's just, man, it's really, what a fun adventure for you to get a chance to do that. And I'm excited that we got a chance to chat. Do you have a question for me?
Oh, man. How did you get, gosh, with a few minutes left here, you asked me a big question. I would love to interview you. I could ask you 20 questions, because I'd love to know more about your combat experience and how you got to where you got to. But I'm not sure I don't know if you want to go down that path, or you got enough time for it. I'd love to do it.
I got time. So I was a combat spy. I went out into the villages every day, Afghanistan, Iraq, Bosnia, other places. And my job was to develop trust with the worst people I could find in their region. And my job was to find the worst people, so because they're the ones that have the nefarious intent towards whatever. And I'd go out every day, and oftentimes I would be out just with me, not terribly often. I don't want to overstate that, but more often than I dare admit, because it's not always the best idea. And I'd go out on a patrol with other, military people, but my job with my access was to see and hear and learn about what nobody else from my patrol was seeing and hearing and learning about, And so I would approach everything differently. And I always focused on trust. So if I was able to build trust with anybody I met, even if it's just micro trust, small, low risk trust, I was constantly building a network of trusted people. And when I say trust, I don't just mean oh yeah, they trust me. I test it because my survival depends on it. So I work culturally to build trust and respect. And the next thing you know, I'm a critical node for not only the locals, but more importantly, within the Army, because an intel guy that writes reports that no one reads is obsolete. So I worked really hard on building trust in both directions so that I could communicate what was going on in both directions, because there's miscommunication between those entities because they just don't have time to do that. So that's ultimately what I did. Along the way, I'm finding out about things, and we're making the world a safer place. I'm doing quotey fingers for those that can't see, but that's the main thing. And then ultimately, the podcast is that in a less lethal form. I go out and I talk to you today, and tomorrow will be a different person, and it'll be different. So artists, entrepreneurs, leaders, singers, whatever. And then the show is basically an intel report where I try to bring something that you're not going to get elsewhere, or consolidate all the thoughts from other entrepreneurs. That's basically, what I did then and what I do now.
Very cool. Yeah, I obviously just kind of getting, ready, and I wanted to hear a couple of your shows, and I was really impressed with sort of the range of people who were on the show, but your ability to sort of talk to everybody, that's a skill, right? The ability to
it's hard to monetize that skill.
This is a guy that's involved in race car driving, right? And you kind of have enough understanding and background to be able to have a really interesting conversation. That's great.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's a tough, like anything else, it's tough to monetize. And we do, the show is done really well, but it would be nice if it did weller.
Yeah, of course. By the way, I'm me and my wife are binge watching Homeland right now.
Oh yeah.
you're talking about this, like, I'm like, all I can think about in my mind is like, the whole, I don't know if you ever watched that show. It's, she's a CIA agent. She's in all these like foreign countries and she's trying to gather intelligence, and it's like the most dangerous places in the world. So
I know that life, and I don't watch Homeland, not because of like, PTSD or anything like that at all, which I have, but it's more because it's hard for me to make the leap, because they have to pack a bunch of people into one character to make the story work. And so for me, it's hard. If you were to see me working, like if you and I went to the most dangerous place on earth, and you be like, Pete's just talking to people. He's having a good time. He's over there drinking shots. Like I have done shots in every conflict zone I've been in, and they've offered them to me. I don't go, I'd like to do shots. They say, do you drink whiskey? And the answer to that question is always, yes, of course, because I'm there to make friends. So
right.
Yeah, it's interesting to be an actual spy who's actually done those things. And then you see how it's represented. And a lot of times people do a pretty good job. What it never is the mold inside of the CIA. It's never that. It's always just a lot of internal conflict and trying to match external conflict, and so that you can have some kind of signal. Well, we can do this again anytime you want. You're welcome to, you know what? If you want, I'll let you host the show and you can interview me all you want. Yeah, you can bring your wife on and everything.
That'd be a good time.
All right, so this is Greg Spillane, everybody. He runs Fancy, and you will fancy the site. Go check it out, fancy.com, and thank you again so much.
Next week.